going to be this page right here. And I've gone through, there were, for example, Trevor and I were troubleshooting. There were a couple different instances of discovery tokens up here. There were 2 instances of T gimbals. And Yuli, I think we fixed the Yuli contract by discovering that there were just these multiple versions out there. And I'm sorry about that.
I'm gonna put some money, some tokens in the contract.
It'll be so exciting. This is the last one I have to check right here. Then we're up to speed. And so I just want to show you one little move right here over in the code. Keep in mind that this is the route module 301 faucets, registered faucets. So if I jump over to the code editor, here it is. And the way the data on this page is populated is we make a GraphQL query for all the transactions with a certain metadata key, right? The one where when people register their faucet, they post some metadata to this key down here. Inevitably, when you use metadata this way and it goes immutably on chain, meaning that it can't be changed, we have to think about, well, what if some wrong metadata gets up there? Or what if, for example, there's 2 versions of a test gimbal faucet contract? What we're able to do is hard code directly into a project a list of transaction hashes that we basically want to ignore. And this on the one hand is kind of a dumb brute force solution. We're saying, okay, well, we're going to get these results. Every one of these results, it's going to have a transaction hash, and then just get rid of the ones that don't work. But actually, this is pretty similar to what happens when you talk about SSID. When we talk about distributed identity solutions, things like DIDs, right? Decentralized identifiers, or verifiable credentials, those are created and they're immutable. So imagine a passport or a driver's license. How do you solve the problem of creating something that can't be changed, but maybe it will expire someday? You have what's called a revocation list. So this is a key concept, and we're just doing a really simple version of it here by hard coding the results from this query that we don't want to put on the page. And so down here, when we actually render the page, the first thing that we do is we take the results of the query and we filter out the ones that are in this list. Okay, we say, okay, only filter out only the TXs where the registration hash is not in the revocation list. Everything else is good to go, map over those and render them on a page with an unlocking and a locking component. So I just wanted to touch on this because today we're going to talk about contribution tokens, which maybe they won't be valid forever. One thing we want to do when we talk about anything that has to do with credential, reputation, we want to be able to have that expire or no longer be valid. And this is a way to think about that. Any questions about what I'm showing you here? Cool. So that's an idea we'll come back to. And there's now a simple version of that in the front end. And as you can see, you can pull these changes locally. You can navigate to this route, and you can see that there's only one version of T gimbal, only one version of discovery, only one version of Yuli. And if any of these other ones break, now we have a simple way to fix it. But what we're here to talk about today is, this is really exciting to me, how we think about a completion token for this iteration of the Plutus PBL course. So maybe you've had a chance to read through this proposal on GitLab. A few of us had time to get together last Friday. I know it was an impromptu session and draft this thing. And the purpose of that was just to have something for us when we come back together at our regularly scheduled time today. And here's what we came up with. We thought about what are the requirements for someone to earn a token, what metadata should be on that token, what can the token do initially, what else might it do in the future. We talked about images on these tokens, and I'll hand it off to Curtis in just a moment for that. And then we talked about the process for receiving one of these. So hopefully you've had time to read this, but I'd like to just go through it one section at a time and pause for your feedback and questions at each step. I'm going to go through this on the web view in the repo because I think it's just easier to read. But right next to this on my computer, I have the README open right here where I can make changes to this, and I'll push them at the end of this meeting. So you might hear me typing as some people give feedback. Any questions about the process? Okay, so here's why this is important. We're going to compile the first instance of GBTE on mainnet. And when we use GBTE, remember that at compile time, we have to specify the policy ID of some access token. So we want to feel good about what this policy is going to be on mainnet before we can mint any contributor tokens. And we're going to need to settle on that before we can compile this, right? So this token is a tool for initially using GBTE. And what's the first instance of the Gimbal Bounty Treasury and Escrow? It's a test instance for development on itself, right? So we're using the tool the first time around to continue to develop the tool and to build capacity about that. So that's why we need this. It's a prerequisite to compiling that first instance. So let's try to make some decisions today. First of all, how do students enrolled in PPBL earn a course completion token? And here's what the proposal says. Everyone has to complete these 3 assignments. Anybody who's been working through the course, you're probably familiar with these. And these are the only assignments at the 100 and 200 level of the course, right? Onboarding and BBK. There's a lot of other things you have to do to get started with the course. There's a lot of other things to learn, right? We recognize that setting up your Plutus environment is not even really represented on here. But the idea is these are 3 simple assignments that if people can do these things, they're in pretty good shape. They've built up the minimum amount of background knowledge. And then more importantly, people who move through 100 and 200 level ought to be able to demonstrate mastery on these 3 mastery level modules. The idea we came up with last week is, okay, given that there are 4 mastery level assignments on each of these, more on 303 in a minute. Level 4 is on hold for the moment. So we could say that the maximum level on 303 is level 3 to start. So if we say that, the max level is 4, then 3, the minimum somebody would have to do is they have to do at least the first 2 levels on all 3 of these. and then optionally levels 3 and 4 as those are available. So I want to pause here for questions. What questions do you have about this section of the proposal? And do you have any objections to it or alternatives that you might suggest? Yeah, Nelson.
So I'm going to just repeat the concern I raised yesterday for those people who weren't there yesterday in the meeting. Here we are required to complete the first 2 of each mastery sections. So this isn't going to be a problem for me. I will get my contribution token later down the road after I complete all of my mastery. This is not an issue for me, but for the mass people who are learning there, is it fair to ask them to complete two levels of each of the mastery modules? Because what we promoted before was sort of that you don't have to, everyone doesn't need to do back-end development. Everyone can someone can say that he will only do front-end, or the other case, someone might be not interested in the front-end part and they might be willing to do only the back-end things. So as I've said it before, it's not going to be an issue for me. I will complete all of those, but instead, and for everyone who is there, I think they will probably be taking the same approach. But we can just contribute what we can just think about. Is will it be good for the people who are taking the course to go through these things? So I would like other people's thought on this instead of just thinking about themselves.
Excellent. I share that concern. I'm so curious to hear what folks have to say. Curtis, what do you think?
So I definitely agree with Nelson, but to play devil's advocate here, by doing so, it would create, in my opinion, a major gap in the representation of what this token is and what it means. So say we removed the mastery levels of 300 and just went with the onboarding and BBK as minimum, and then you can go as far as completing the entire course. To me, that means somebody who has the token can either just be barely new to Cardano, understands the testnet, and knows what a token is and a transaction is, all the way up to somebody who can write code, build Cardano transactions, build the front end, right? So there's a huge difference in the representation of that certificate, of that token. So is that an acceptable opinion of the token within the community? Is it okay that there's such a huge difference in what that token can actually mean, in what level of experience you actually have? That's kind of an open question.
I'm so happy to be having this conversation. Thank you for this, guys. Juan, what do you think?
Thank you, James. Yes, I think I'm agree with Nelson and also with Chris. And I think, but the reality is that my concern as representing here those who have a little bit of limitations on time, capability, and many other things. My issue will be like time. And do I need to be an expert to? I mean, the idea with this course is to bring experts to the map of Cardano, or is onboarding for different areas. Let's say in my case, for business to understand, and that will bring the idea of perhaps having more than one level of this. But the reality is that quality is involved. There are many things. One is onboarding, make sure that Jimbo Labs is known as it is for instruction and onboarding people who is not necessarily proficient to technology, but at the end of the day on board. And also prepare people who is already proficient to excel on the things that the job demands, you know. So, you know, those, I'm agree with both of you. I just want to put in those two the items that I mentioned, and the idea perhaps to have two different levels. But the other very important aspect is that we have to maintain the quality of the material that the material and the results that Jimbo Labs provides, because it's not just a course. It's not just going to a course, and it's make sure that you learn, and you learn by doing. So that's the other thing, you know, we are doing things. So those are kind of the questions I can bring.
Mm-hmm. That has some other implications that I want to come back to later in this session. First, I see Roberto, then A, then Yuli, then Curtis.
Yeah, so what I understood from what Nelson said is not that you get the completion token from just doing the onboarding and BBK, but doing on the onboarding and BBK plus one of the 3 routes that are offered through the mastery level. So you would be a completion token on the front end route, or a completion token on the back end route, or the query, or whatever. And you could also have the incentive of, yeah, and you complete everything, you get like the full stack. But I do agree with Nelson that not everyone is going to want to dive into, especially because Haskell and Plutus are huge barriers to entry that require massive amounts of time. There are very little resources to learn Haskell or Plutus, and it's just going to deter a lot of people that could be helping us with front end and all other sorts of issues like Koyos queries and GraphQL that are just not going to be interested in spending the amount of time that it takes to learn Haskell and Plutus.
Mm-hmm. Hey, what do you think?
Hey, oh crap. There goes my solar panel. What do I think? I think I'll try and compress my thoughts here. I think we ought to be optimizing for the end state, right? The outcome. As I see it, so far the thinking here is, hey, there's some particular end state which is being presumed, prescribed, right, to be the optimal state. And I think if we are to create the architecture for something which will live within a composable, decentralized environment, which is fast evolving, I think that model is similar to like, hey, you go to university, and then at the end of however many years, you then get a degree. That model gradually is becoming more and more obsolete, and more practical, sort of like, what is it called, micro or bit degrees, or and so on, right? Where I can envisage someone coming along, doing like one particular module, and being like, yo, I can be able to like go ahead and kill it, and create a whole bunch of value just from like knowing that, and maybe pairing it to their domain experience, and creating a whole bunch of value, right? And in doing that, I think optimizing for that, like, then it creates an environment where the token needs to be understood in context. It's not just a default, oh, that person has this thing, so yes, they should be able to know everything, when that's actually not really a healthy or sustainable way to think about it. And it won't do much to build trust for the person providing the service, or the person seeking a service, if that makes sense. Yeah, those are kind of my quick thoughts, and I need to get back to fixing this thing.
There goes the solar panel again, legendary. That's a really helpful idea too. Let's come back to that. Yuli, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so for the, maybe we can have something like a participation token for the first 3 modules, so that everyone gets a token, but we can for the contribution, you need a higher token level than with the, so for the first 3, you know what I mean?
So this could turn into perhaps multiple tokens. There's one token here, and then another token here is a
you can have a participation token as prerequisite for the completion token or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Curtis, what do you think?
Yeah, very similar. You know, after hearing everybody's opinions, I start to think back on, you know, my kids are in t-ball and baseball right now, and every kid gets a trophy, right? And this has been thought over for decades, if not probably much longer, you know, centuries. They've been contemplating, do you reward children, you know, for their work, even if their work is not up to par? And I think at least in the current times, we've come to the conclusion that early stages of learning, you reward them for making just the effort, and that incentivizes them, that motivates them to continue their education. It gives them the feedback, and then their brain, you know, creates happy thoughts. So it motivates us to continue on with that education. So I can definitely see that point of things, where give them something to feel like they've accomplished it, and they can take that as far as they want. So one thing I'm kind of hearing or translating from here is we can either require the onboarding and one of the 300 modules. And what if we did, you know, one of the 300 modules all the way to mastery level 4, or all 3 minimum mastery level 1, or what Yuli said, which is a participation token and then different requirements for the contribution token or completion token.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that the conversation is shifting to what would be an alternative. And so, Curtis, thanks for those possibilities, right? We can think about multiple sets of rules for minimums. So one thing I heard Curtis say is, okay, well, it could be some minimum level across the board, or it could be maxing out at least one of these, right? You have to get to the highest level of at least one. And that would be the kind of rules we could absolutely write. I think that's a good alternative. I think Yuli's proposal to have 2 separate tokens is also a potential alternative, right? Let's think about, okay, should you have 1 token for this and 1 for that? And just jumping ahead for a moment, what are these tokens for? Well, in one sense, the course completion token would unlock the ability to contribute at this initial instance of GBTE. But maybe a participation token would unlock access to something different, right? And that's the beauty of this, is that if there are multiple tokens, anyone who spins up an instance of any given DApp, whether it's an instance of GBTE, or think about the instance of faucets that we built on pre-production, or the list could go on, anything else you build, you can decide if the participation token matters, if the completion token matters, or as other tokens come out, individual DApp developers, individual DAOs, groups get to make those decisions. One more thing I want to put on your plate here. Keep in mind, this is Plutus PBL. Ideally, it won't be the only PBL that ever exists, and there would be other courses. So make sure, let's all make sure to distinguish between a Plutus PBL token on mainnet, right? On mainnet with real value that really needs to mean something about completing Plutus PBL versus other potential courses. Lucas is already building another course, Cardano for non-devs. Tokenomics PBL is coming our way. Dandelion PBL, that's going to have another completion token. And so what we want to do is set the rails for ourselves to think about this, but also maintain the integrity. What does it mean if we're talking about PPBL, course completion? Last thing before I hand it back to you, Juan. Also keep in mind that this meeting right here, this conversation we are having is going to happen again. So this is part of our expertise building. And everyone here, I hope you can imagine yourself as a future facilitator of conversations like this with other groups who are coming together using these tools and need to write some rules about what a credential or completion token might be. Right? This itself is something that you might gain expertise in, and maybe that would be represented by another token. That was a lot, but I just thank you for spurring ideas. Juan, what you got?
Yeah, I think participation is key, and I just put it on the chat. And this is learned by doing. So even synchronically or asynchronically, but perhaps we have the time to produce them. I mean, to show proficiency, because that's the idea. The idea is not a token. It's to be able to do what is intended to do, to learn. We have a way to test or not to test, to demonstrate, which is actually by building on 1, 2, and 3, and also 1, 2, and 3 modules. That will be, I'm not sure about the idea of now. I'm not sure about the idea of putting 2 tokens on that, because perhaps 1 token we can use just 1 and just wait for give a deadline, like a year or something, for the token to be, for the material to be completed. More than that, actually, perhaps this module will be obsolete by 1 year from now. So yeah, the idea is to be able to participate by doing and complete the material. So yeah, I think it's important that.
Yeah. So to be clear, the course is going to stay open indefinitely, and this will be an open-ended minting policy. So anybody who completes the course, whatever we decide, what completion means, whoever does it, as long as the class is running, is going to get this token. 3 weeks from now, 3 months from now, eventually we're going to release version 3 of this course. This is summer 2022 is version 2, right? So, but we never want, let's assume that minting will never be closed for this thing. And we're going to give people whatever time they need to get to that point. Hey, what do you think?
Yeah, great points which have been made. So particularly, with what Juan just said, like at the end of the day, this is not about tokens. This is about like learning by doing, and it's a value that we create. So I completely second that. What I'm going to add on to here is a little bit of something which I think we haven't really touched on that much, and it might be opening a little bit of a kind of worms. But if you think of what you know, the possibilities here, like going back to our conversation yesterday about tokenomics and the affordances that it provides. So yeah, you've got long-term stuff.
Oh, hey, you still there? Hey. Hmm.
Shoot, normally it comes back by now.
Yeah, that was the usual amount of time right there. Hey, I'm gonna mute A, and he'll figure it out when he's reconnected. Let's jump to Nelson.
Yeah, I was just going to share something on my list. This is not a solution for the immediately. Okay, so I was just I think I shared a a simple mirror board that says a contract. We can create a contract that burns the previous token and then update the metadata and then get the new token. So my idea would be at the end of the cohort, the session will just distribute according to their level, the participation token or whatever with the correct metadata at the end of the cohort. It will be done by the team, and then the contract is there to update your metadata and whatever is fees that is required for minting and all of the manual labor, like doing that thing that should be automated. So the guys who are handling the project, the PBL, they just have to give away the tokens at the end of the cohort. And if the person wants to update that, then the system is out there. So the guy can go there, put his token on the contract, and burn it, and then mint the new with the new metadata, and all of the fees, all of the work has to be done by himself. So that would be that would be something I would be considering to build later on.
Oh, I was just writing that down. Yeah, I'm adding here that metadata can be updated, and Nelson, that idea of having a contract that allows people to upgrade. That's very interesting. And that gets me thinking, I've mentioned it a few times, I think, but I'm excited to expose Canvas data via its GraphQL API and think about how that data might be used to trigger, for example, what Nelson's talking about, right? If a query to the Canvas API shows that you have achieved higher mastery levels and you're burning an existing completion token, then you should be able to mint one that has higher mastery levels on it. And that's a really cool system to build. I hope you can hear as I'm saying that there's a few components that we need to learn about, including the Canvas API, but that's definitely in bounds. I love it. And without that, the automated part, right? Even without getting the automated part, we should assume that people will want to upgrade, right? Whatever the minimum requirements we decide today, somebody might meet those minimum requirements, mint a token, but then come back later and say, hey, could you remint my token with higher mastery levels? And yes, the blockchain does allow for that. Hey, you back?
Yes, and this is a little bit embarrassing. Did you hear anything that I said from before?
We got the first couple sentences and then it just went blank.
Okay, my apologies. Okay, so I'll I'll try to, because I spoke for like a good 3 to 4 minutes without realizing.
Oh, we
You
figured.
know,
Yeah, my money was on that result. Yeah.
super embarrassing, but okay. Okay, so I'll just try and quickly summarize the thought. So far, yeah, I agree with everything that Juan was saying with regards to um the why being important, not the what of the tokens. And so I just want to add on a slight technical thing, which might open up a little bit of a kind of worms here, in that so far what we've been talking about is validation only happening if someone has active or current active custody of tokens without actually realizing that, in the transaction, right, the inputs to the UTXO already records all the tokens which were in that transaction, as well as metadata, right, for that specific transaction. So technically someone could, going back to the whole idea of wanting these assets to have more velocity and just flow, I could earn a bunch of tokens this week, and next week, say for example, I could then gift those, or for those to someone who's earned a particular aspect of a thing which is represented by one of the tokens that I have. And that shouldn't then in a way disqualify me, or be a negative. If anything, I think that ought to be a thing which is encouraged, from a sort of design standpoint, because we already have that history, and when it comes to querying historical stuff, right, provided we have an address, and we know what the TX ID is, etc., and even within that, maybe even passing through some of the UTXOs, because so far I believe there isn't really a straightforward way to query metadata, but yeah, there are other ways that we can be able to validate these things without actually requiring the active holding or custodying of said assets.
Okay, so to now take these ideas and to think about actions. One option is we stick with the proposal as it is. And I've heard so far 2 suggestions for alternatives to this plan. One of the things I've heard is let's keep this bit and then add a different condition where instead of achieving the minimum level on all 3 modules, you can either get the minimum level on all 3 or max out on one of them. Would there be any objections to adding that condition, right? Saying this right here, the first 2 on all of them, or the highest level on any of them? Any objections to that? And yeah, Nelson, actually what Nelson's doing is a great idea. Thumbs up if anybody wants to tap the thumbs up. I got 2 thumbs up for that suggestion. 3, no objections yet. 4 thumbs up.
What what would someone need to use for an objection? The laughing face, or
Unmute. No, objections have to be specific and actionable. It's a rule. Just saying I hate it does not count as an objection. Okay, so let's go here and change this. So option 1 Option 2.
So this is a good opportunity to also include, maybe, like, do we want, if we go with the option that you just explained, James, do we want to lower the minimum for all 3 to mastery level 1, to open it up to people that, you know, to Nelson's and Juan's point, essentially, or leave it as it stands?
It's a tough question. That is a deeply philosophical question in my mind. Is the goal of this course to give out as many tokens as possible so people feel good? Or is the purpose of this token to represent that people really learned something? And I know from working on these modules, mastery level 1 is designed to be that thing that gives people just the initial nudge. Mastery level 1 doesn't ask too much of learners. And as somebody who is routing real funds, real ADA from the Gimbal Labs treasury earned by Gimbal Pool into what is hopefully real contribution, you know, and here I'm thinking from the perspective of somebody who really wants to build stuff. To me, I want the minimum of at least 2. But yeah, we have to decide, is this about letting people in, even if they accomplish less? Or is it about setting a standard that will hopefully make our work relevant? Juan, what do you think?
You know, put it that way, I think number 2 is the option. We have to, this is open. Anybody who wants to make the effort and learn, the option is there, it's open. So yeah, I think for me, number 2.
No, I'll write this up. I like this plan, though. I think this is very pragmatic. You go all the way to level 4 on one of them. That says something specific about what you can do. You go to level 2 on all 3. That's a really good baseline, and it has you prepared to try contributing. Keep in mind that the only thing this token creates access for is the first instance of GBTE. And if you haven't looked at this yet, it is live and people can take a look. The first few bounties are designed to be completed by as many people as want to, and can be seen as continued learning experiences. These are chances for people to earn real ADA and real gimbals, essentially for doing another project, right? And so the truth is, what does this token offer access to? A chance to keep learning, okay? And you're going to be supported to do that. And I hope that the level of support and the commitment to support that we're providing here at Gimbal Labs makes people say, okay, well, yeah, they're asking me to get to level 2, but they're going to help me get there, right? They're going to do, these are not people who are going to just disappear and say, well, you better take care of yourself, right? So to me, I think keeping, again, sorry, I think we've already reiterated this, right? But keeping this at least level 2 is really important. A, and then Roberto.
Yeah, I keep thinking about, I mean, I hate the concept of participation trophies because, you know, like, well, I think I hate it in the context if, you know, if that's kind of all or it kind of thing, right? But if a quote unquote participation trophy acts as like a beginner level show of intent, right, which has a low barrier to entry, I think the cost benefit of that is much higher. I mean, it makes a lot more sense, right? Because it'll, as the asset percolates throughout the network, people are like, hey, what's that, right? In a way, it acts like a conversation starter, which does free advertising, right? Which people be like, oh, what is that? Okay, yeah, it's this thing. Yeah, I started it, and it'll act as a constant reminder of like, hey, actually, I can become employable if I actually go back to this thing and get like more, like higher levels, etc. And in a way, the way I think of it is like there isn't much cost, especially if they're already tiered, right, with the the different colors and metals, etc. kind of thing, right? Like you could have, I don't know, like a steel or iron one or something, right? That's not like bronze or silver or gold or whatever. Yeah, without affecting much of the whole like tokenomic dynamic, I think, at least. Anyway, yeah, that's just my quick thoughts on that.
What would you think about those participation tokens being on testnet, like they have been throughout the course, but not needing to be on mainnet?
I think that there's a value just from a publicity standpoint, going back to the whole idea of free marketing, in them being on mainnet, right? Because as people are looking at quote unquote NFTs, etc., like they're not like toggling to testnet to like, oh, have a look at what I have in testnet kind of thing, right? Because and yeah, so yeah, from an exposure standpoint, and then the other thing is testnet. So far, when people think testnet, they just think not of value for majority of people, right? Like it's obviously of value. You get to really test out things from a technical standpoint, but when it comes to actual like liquidity, and a thing that you can be able to use to like pay for a meal or whatever, or even a lot more than that, you can actually be able to earn. I think mainnet makes more sense than testnet, and yeah, the other points in that regard. But I think it's a valid question or consideration. Although I would lean a lot more to mainnet.
Roberto, what do you think?
So I'm sort of in this idea of what we yesterday. I'm sorry about that. I'm reading the article you sent, James.
Oh, hey, Roberto, you're breaking up pretty bad. I can't really catch you.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, so I was reading yesterday up on a little bit on online reputation systems because of what we talked about yesterday, and I think that's a little bit of I think we're not really considering that part, the part of these, whether we want it or not. This is a reputation system that we're building, right? We're going to go out in the world, not necessarily into the bounty system, but to others, and we're going to show them that token. So this is going to be a representation not only of Gimbal Labs as an education institution, but as us as learners, right? Because if we mess up somewhere else with a Gimbal Labs token, that's going to say something, right? So I think that's something that we need to consider in terms of, it's not really about completing a module. It's about what can we do, right? What skills do we have that we can provide value to the ecosystem? Because yeah, it's a Plutus PBL, but what happens if what I want to do is just understand what Plutus is about and how it works, because I have a legal background. And so I can contribute to designing smart contracts or contributing to documentation, right? So I want to understand what it is, but I don't really want to maybe build on it. So what does the token say about what I can do for others? How I participate in the community? What skills does it provide me other than I finished the module? Sort of going on the ideas of what the article was talking about, of the purpose of the reputation system. And one of the points that it talked about was facilitate member matching, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is trying to tell people, listen, these people are ready to and responsible and have been through a process where they prepared to, they're really serious about, and that's why they can do it on the mainnet, of doing something. What is that something that they are skilled to do and that we are certifying with that token that they are able to do, right? Right. That's kind of what I was thinking in terms of designing it and what the goal should be of what the token means or certifies, right? What does it mean to be a mastery level 1 in what? In
right.
Right?
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree with that completely. And again, what you're saying makes me think that there's a future for additional PBL courses. This one is Plutus PBL. And the goal of this course is to get people ready to participate in full stack Plutus development. And we want that to mean something out in the world, right? So marketing is a good reason to have participation tokens, but bloat and reputation dilution might be a reason not to do that. And we have to think really hard about how much do we want these to matter? Dom, to your question, we are talking about two things at once. One is the process for earning a token and what that entails and what it is for earning a token that represents course completion of Plutus project-based learning. That token is also an access token that allows people to contribute to bounties on the first instance of this dApp right here, which is being built in real time. So when this is posted on mainnet, people will be able to use this token. And if they have one, they'll be able to have one like this, right? They'll be able to commit to bounties, complete those, and earn real rewards. So it's both course completion and ability to contribute. Now, it sounds like participation tokens might be a good idea. It sounds like the idea of using these as reminders and for marketing could be a really valid reason for these things to exist. I'd like to put out a challenge. If someone writes a proposal for those participation tokens and provides a use case for them, just like this proposal. Remember, this proposal is about PPBL course completion tokens with the purpose of contributing here. So if anybody's serious about the need for a participation token leading up to that, I think the minimum requirement to continue that conversation should be write a similar proposal. Write a proposal called PPBL course participation token, and then show how that token will be used. And what that would do is it would ground the existence of that token in a real meaning for existing. And it would give us something, I think, more substantial to talk about. But, I find myself realizing, if we're talking about this right here, let's keep in mind those other eventual things that we want to see exist. And let's decide if people want to commit to building those. How does that sound? Does that sound fair? Hey.
Yeah, it does. The first thing actually came to mind there is the Cardano noob idea that you spoke about not that long ago, and maybe along the lines of what Lucas is working on, which I think is super valuable and important. But yeah, I think folks going away and giving some thought to what that would look like. I've got some ideas. When would you say, when would be a good time to then talk about it next? Would it be tokenomics, or would it be the next PPBL live coding? Or
I think it's as soon as we have a written proposal to look at. Right. This is a great example of an idea that naturally emerges. And this is the beauty of Cardano development. I hope you've all seen this pattern. You talk about one thing and people's minds explode with the additional possibilities extending from that thing. And all of us have a lot of those ideas in mind. So to me, this also becomes a question about priorities, right? Focus matters when there's an infinite number of possibilities. And so if anyone is serious about this idea, write a proposal. And as soon as something's in writing, let's get together and talk about it, okay? I also like the idea, Roberto mentioned this idea of wanting, suppose there's somebody who wants to be a project manager, but not so much a developer. Perhaps there's a project manager token, right? That draws on some of the course material here, but has different requirements. Everything we're doing is meant to be forkable, repackageable, and composable. You're able to take this repo, fork it, and rewrite these rules. You're able to take the Plutus contracts of anything you've seen here, fork those projects, and rewrite those rules. Even in Canvas, you're able to grab resources from other courses and reuse them in other contexts. And if anybody here wants teacher access, just let me know. There's already a bunch of people on this call who are experimenting with building courses. And if you want to be able to do the same, and if you want to be able to reuse but recontextualize some of the lesson materials, the door is open for that. So I think those are really great things to explore. If we agree that this token is about PPBL course completion, and these are the two rules, I'll clean up the wording here, but this is the idea. Any final objections to moving forward with this plan right here? Yeah, and then extending from there, right? Like Justin is saying, back end. That's something we haven't even talked about. That's part of Dandelion, but maybe people are starting to think about a dedicated back end for a GBTE instance. That's going to be both work that people might decide to take on, but it might also be something that yields some credential. And so that, just to jump down here, right? Whatever we build with this PPBL course completion token is just a first step. Every time somebody builds a new instance of the GBTE, one of the things they'll have to do is decide on the validator parameters at compile time. And remember, one of those parameters is the policy ID for the contribution token. And so if anybody ever instantiates any project where a policy ID is a validator parameter, you get to decide what token to use. So some people might eventually open up an instance of GBT and they'll say, yep, you know what? That original completion token is sufficient. Others might say, you know what? I need to mint a separate contribution token for my instance of this treasury and bounty system because I have different standards. They might be higher, they might be lower. You might want to look at both the completion token and the transactions that that token has gone through. So as this data is not edited yet, right? Or not formatted yet. But the basic thing right here we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to see the track record of any given contribution token. And somebody might want to look at that on-chain data and use that to make up their own rules about minting additional tokens, right? Or you could start from scratch. You might build something where a participation token is sufficient for unlocking contribution. You might build a separate course that has different rules that people have to achieve. So this brings us to, I know I've been going kind of up and down a little bit. This brings us to the format of the metadata. Let's move to this part right here. Here is a general form. This is not yet providing a standard, right? It's a suggestion. It's an early attempt at putting the right amount of information on chain, enough that people can use it in decision making, but not so much that it's overwhelming and cost prohibitive. This is what we came up with last week. Include the name of the course, the version of the course, a URL, then an array of objects that have the key is which module, and the mastery level is just a number. And then we could have another URL for the policy. Now, Trevor already suggested, he wasn't able to make it today, but he wrote a note on Discord a little while ago saying maybe we don't need the course URL part. Maybe one URL with a description is enough, right? And the link to the course could be updated somewhere like this. What other feedback or questions or proposals for change do folks have for the metadata right here? Nelson, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that one. Just the one URL thing. I mean, what I want for my token to be is to be of the simplest, less information, but that tells me everything I need to know. So those two URLs, that kind of creep me out just to see those two URLs there. I just think one is enough.
Yeah, I'm changing that now just to see what it looks like for everybody. What else are you thinking? So maybe it can look like this instead. Hey, what do you say?
Yeah, this has been spoken about in the past, and is controversial. And actually, Yuli in the chat mentioned something along these lines, which is, going back to the idea that we have spoken about linking it to the to people, right? Say for example, because to use an analogy of the real world, if you go to a particular university, your end completion accreditation has the university's reputation tied to it, right? If you do a PhD, whoever supervises, right, their reputation is tied to the university and also tied to your accreditation, right? And again, the criticism of this last time we spoke about it was cult of personality, but in this particular case, I think a possible consideration at some point, and this might be, might make sense further down the line in a different proposal, but to include, say, the whoever has created that particular course, or whoever was the point guard, or whatever the expression is there, because I feel like, going back to reputation and the value that that is in that, I think there's something to be said for the quality of teaching and wanting to have the incentive to have people, actually incentivized to want to learn under particular people because they would understand better, but also be able to again give credit and value, going back to conversations which we've had about how teachers are really undervalued within the current system of things, and the ability to be a good teacher is so valuable. So anyway, I think if we completely kind of jettison the idea of linking it to people because cult of personality is a thing which is of concern, I think it might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and it might be in a way a similar thing to this idea of, hey, it's trustless technology, so like we do not need trust in this whole thing, like just rely on the objectivity of the code and cryptography and that and so on, when that really isn't the fundamental of what creates a value here.
I realize that there's something missing from this proposal, which is that each token will have a unique name. And I know that's not even here yet. We should have had that on here. So yeah, these will be non-fungible in the extent that they'll all have the same policy ID, but each one will have a unique token name. And so my question would be, is a unique token name sufficient to be that personal identifier, or should we add something as well to the metadata? Anybody have good instincts on that after hearing A's ideas? Juan, what do you think?
I think, besides
Oh, hey, we're not getting sound from you. What?
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey.
Yeah. So I think that besides the name, I think it would be important to have the fact that the token is a prerequisite to the next level, and I don't know if that is included on the here or in the next iteration or the other, but yeah, that would be the only thing I see that would be important.
Excellent. So yeah, the next level is to be determined by anybody who decides to build additional levels. But here, let's think, before we decide if we need more metadata, let's think for a moment about the token name itself. So the way it's been done so far on pre-production is we've put a unique name in front of some shared suffix, right? Oh, shared, something like that, right? So an example, I'm just looking at, I want to get the syntax right here. GBTE pre-prod, right? So that's not really what we want. So the example has been name pre-prod like this. Now these are not specific to GBTE, so they would be course completion tokens. So what do people think about something like name PBL completion? That kind of thing. Hey, what do you think?
Yeah, just to pick up on Yuli's point, saying that the token will be okay, she thinks. I think I think in thinking about this, it helps to understand, are we talking about humans or are we talking about machines? I think a good example here is if you're to tell someone, hey, delegate to, you don't start to belt out the 32 character pull ID, right? You say gimbal, right? Or the or piece or unsick or whatever, right? In this particular case, it dehumanizes it by just saying, yeah, it's just the course. It's just the course number, right? Going back to the university example, you don't just say the name of the course or module or whatever. It's usually who's teaching it as well, right? Because that matters as well. I just thought quickly chime that or add that a little bit in.
So that brings us back up here. Yeah, so like, should we add a course provider field like this? And then we could do something like this. Any objections to adding that bit right there? Hey, does that get at what you're saying?
Yeah, it does. And yeah, in part, it's not specific to like a particular person, but yeah, it's one step closer to that. I like it.
There's some interesting work that folks are doing with mentorship too. There's a lot of different groups working on mentorship, and I'm really curious about tokens that represent people working together in a mentor relationship and exchanging those with each other. And that feels really personal. As a content creator for this course, I'd actually, I'm probably one of the most fully doxed Cardano participants out there. But I don't need my name as a writer on these tokens personally. So I would just be curious, like, what else we could use.
Yeah, I feel like you're sort of what's the word? What's the word? You're sort of around a similar area which I'm trying to arrive at, which is this human to human, as you mentioned, the mentorship idea, and that's I think of value, and it would be great to figure out a way to have that represented and have that evolve. At the same time, as you're saying, you don't feel the need to have your particular name on it. I think having the option, right, the field, you could just have NA or or not have it be filled, but just having the option there, because in a way, like, what we're trying to do here to some extent, beyond just what we're doing here for ourselves, is if this works, other people then adopt it and use it themselves. So in a way, this is kind of like a schema that we're designing in hopes, not we're doing it selfishly for our needs, right? But it has the secondary effect of being adopted possibly. So I think in that context, having the option of from a schema standpoint, like I don't know, teacher or whatever. I don't know what the exact word would be, but having the option, which, and again, some people could want to create, like some people might not even want to have the provider field created, right? Maybe like, what's that stake pool with so many stake pools, which doesn't even, like, no one knows who's running it. I forget its name, but some people might want to like completely be anonymous but create the content and be able to want to contribute to the thing without direct doxable information.
Curtis,
So when you first introduced this, James, personally, I find course provider Gimbal Labs to be very valuable information to put into the metadata. That's just personal opinion. But when you first introduced this concept, my thought was, okay, yes, we need to indicate that somewhere. I think that's also valuable of who taught the courses, but it doesn't necessarily need to be, in the metadata itself. And when you said, okay, where there's going to be a URL, to me, that served a lot of purposes. That URL should serve, okay, what are the components of the course that was, the concepts, the topics. They did Plutus, they did backend, they did CLI, they did front end with Next.js, some of those tags, those labels to indicate what the concepts were. But additionally, that website could present who those lead teachers were, or who those teachers were for those particular modules, and then leave it up to them, just like we did in the Canvas PPPL course. We left it up to each lead teacher to determine how they wanted to be represented in Canvas, whether it's an anonymous, alias, or their full name. And that's how we presented them in the course, in the first, homepage. So if that data can be aggregated to this URL, then they can see this in the metadata, click on the link, and then get more information. What was included in the course, who taught the course, and you still get that one-to-one relationship, but the teacher gets to decide if they want to remain anonymous or not, based on how they're presented in Canvas.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm adding Yuli's question down here. There's a lot of different ways to answer this question. And actually, for me, the ability to query all of these, there's a few different ways to approach that. Yeah, think about that. So provider could be anything. And if people use something that's structured with at least these three, they could write whatever they want there. And they could even, if people can choose later on for this to be an array of strings. And so I think adding provider gives people an open space to add names if they want to. Personally, I would lean away from adding another field for individuals like this. Yeah. Seeing connections, that's good. Curtis, what do you have?
I like the idea of the array because as we've seen with early just brainstorming ideas of these PBL concepts, we got so much initiative and contribution from C4C and some of the DAOs out there. Little Fish is trying to get involved, right? We got Lucas branching off with his own thing. So I feel like we could, in the future, if we collaborate with, say, a DAO or C4C to deploy and develop the tokenomics PBL or whatever the case is, that can get contained in that array of providers because we all collectively collaborated to build out this module. So Gimbal Labs is not going to always be the quote unquote issuer necessarily. It was a collaboration, potentially.
Right. Cool. Let's leave that. Let's do that. Just as a suggestion. Hey, Bernard, what do you think?
I wanted to find out why are you hard coding values like 301, 302, 303? Because if we do have an upgrade, let's say from Vassal, we go to another Vassal version 2 within 4 months, and then all of a sudden the testnet and mainnet, they change, and we change all this, we are going to have probably course 401, 402. So what I was asking is there a need to hard code, or we can just, I have posted there on the chart my suggestion that probably we can have like course details, and then under course, the UI, this, what you call it, the front end form where people are capturing, like, my students have finished the WIMS, they are using this to get certification. Then I will, when I'm taking this and putting a template on WIMS, I will fill in the course details of WIMS in that course at that particular period. And then also for the details. And then under permanent UI ID here, we must have a way where the recipient cannot sell that certificate. For example, I know maybe Kimberlab certification is gonna be more of a value when a lot of companies are hiring, like what is happening with Plutus Pioneer. I was one of the first students there. During that 10-week, it had no value. But today you see a lot of Catalyst, they are always requiring a Plutus Pioneer completion course as a prerequisite. Same with Kimberlabs is coming. They will say, we want either a MOOC qualification or Kimberlabs course completion or IOHK or whatever. So then all of us in our different environments can just, when we are taking this template and giving it to our own course environments, we fill in on the front end, what am I going to have as a course details there, and it's an object, so which means that will vary, and also the details will vary according to the content creators, what they value for that course. And remember again, some of the courses students are going to pay, so they will want on their metadata something which an employer is gonna demand. All right, I would like to know if you did on this course end-to-end Web3, and then that detail, if it is there, the nice part with this, once it's on the blockchain, it's permanent. If that is my contribution, this, I agree with it 100%. The only thing I was just asking is, why should we hard code? Even if we are going to use it for Kimberlabs, why don't we generate those metadata fields dynamically, and then they be created on the contract for this course, summer. Then on the next one, winter, we have another different metadata that relates to that period with those different students. Because if we hard code it, like, we know the problems of hard coding that are going to come in the long run. Otherwise, we are saying all Kimberlab students from now till 5 years to come are going to be doing 301, 302, and 303. Could be even more, could be even different, could be even used by other institutions like EPU or WIMS. That is my contribution.
Excellent. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're making me realize this is something A brought up yesterday that Charles Hoskinson had mentioned recently. You know, the less you do, the more that things are ready for the future, right? You can maximize backwards compatibility by not including too much. You can always add more when you realize it's needed later, but it's hard to mess with data when one version has all this extra stuff and another version has all that extra stuff. So I think that's one thing for us to consider. Just for clarity, Bernard, what we're talking about here is not a comprehensive solution. What we're talking about here is only the Plutus PBL course completion token. Other people are going to mint other tokens eventually for both their own organizations and for different courses, even here at Gimbalabs. This course has modules 301, 302, 303. These are specific to this use case. And in this course, people get up to level 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So these are not referencing courses. These are actually referencing something specific within this course right here.
Okay.
Dom, to your question, a faucet would be a great place to go eventually. And automating the minting of these by looking at Canvas results, querying the Canvas API, and having that trigger the minting of a token, that is going to be such a wonderful thing to build. It's going to take time to build that, and it's not built yet. So this first version, this is just going to be minted by a couple of us course facilitators, including myself, who share the keys on a one of many script. Okay. And we're gonna, we'll put these out there. Another thing I should note is that the version of GBTE that's going to use this initially is based on Plutus V1 contracts. The main reason for that is Mesh is almost, but hasn't yet released some of the Plutus V2 functionality. For example, reference scripts that we'd want to be employing in V2 of this thing. What's good about that is it opens up the opportunity. We know that the version of Gimbal, Bounty, Treasury, and Escrow that goes live on mainnet when we're ready will soon be upgraded to Plutus V2. And when it is, and when it's compiled, that's already going to create a new contract address, because Plutus V2 is just a different way of interacting with contracts in the first place. And at that time, if we realize, hey, that first iteration of the course token, we realized there was something that we just completely overlooked, but by using it, we realized what we were missing. We're going to be able to create these again. So I just want you to know that this is still experimental, and the stakes aren't too high. And to reassure everybody, we're not claiming that this is the one and only standard forever. In fact, we know that the only way standards emerge is when people go out there and they try something and they say, hey, look, here's how we did it. Would you do it the same way? WIMS, would you do it the same way? ADAO, would you do it the same way? Emergo? And the best thing that could possibly happen is they say, heck no, we wouldn't do it that way. Here's what we do. Because once that moment happens, now you have a real conversation that is leading towards real standards that people with skin in the game are making decisions about. Right now, we're just trying to get that conversation started. There's a lot of what ifs out there. There's a lot of maybe we shoulds out there. And we got to create space for ourselves to go test these things. And so with that lens in mind, look at this metadata again. If I drop teacher, I like this addition of a provider and the option of that being an array of strings. I think that's cool. If we minimize the URL to one URL, that makes a lot of sense to me. What else do we need to change here to have something that's effective to start, but also likely future-proof, right? It's not bloated, and it's possible to have, for it to grow in the future.
Can I also bring something here? How many tokens here are we going to have? Are we going to have 2, 3, 4? We've got a course completion, and there is a contribution token. Won't it be too much?
Excellent. Yeah, I
Because
got you
from
right
what
there.
I am used to, from what I'm used to is,
Yeah.
if in a real sense I'm doing a course, I have got a transcript, which is like a report of my progress with the marks of what I have done. But when I complete, then I get the certification. So wouldn't we, if we had one token, and then the transcript be those
Bernard, I'll catch you. Bernard, hey,
Okay.
I'll catch you up on that. Yeah, that's how we started this meeting, because you're exactly right. We are talking about one token. It's a single token that represents PPBL course completion, and that will open up access. So this is the same thing. The heading here says PPBL course completion and contribution token. And just to be clear, this is one thing that
it's one token.
That's a single token that opens up access to one instance of Gimbal Bounty, Treasury, and Escrow. That's all for now. And the goal is to give us a place to start with room to grow from there.
All right. Because I took that to be two tokens.
Yeah,
so now
it's one token. Yep. This is, yep, that's right. It's one token.
Great.
Hey.
Yeah, just a quick question. With the cost provider, okay, sorry, I was looking at a different, I was looking at that bit there, and it said string, or maybe I was looking at the wrong, sorry, I was looking at the module number where it said string, and I thought, okay, didn't we say that would make more sense as an array? But yeah, I can see down there that it's represented as an array, which makes sense. In this case, you could have like Gimbal Labs, and then the next entry could be like Bob or whatever, and then you could be able to infer in a sort of descending order that that I don't know, Bob is a teacher, and higher up is more of the institution.
All right, wow. 90 minutes goes fast when you start moving towards standards. I think we could keep going right now, but I think the most productive move is let me push these changes as they are. And let's pick up this conversation tomorrow. I can hang on here, but I think it's worth it to chew on these ideas, each of us individually, and come back with our fresh thoughts tomorrow after spending that time. So I just pushed those changes. You'll see those latest updates here. I just refreshed. And you can see our metadata is a little bit different now. There's Bob. Here's the URL, and I'll drop this with the recording of today's meeting in Discord. And thanks. This is really hard work, but thank you so much for attending to it. I recognize that this is one of those key things in the years to come. People are going to have to make decisions about what a token like this represents. We are not making all those decisions right now. All we're doing is trying to create space where more people can engage in those kinds of conversations. And if I've learned one thing, it's that the moment you propose something, you give people a real project. You give people the project of arguing with you, right? Of coming up with their own. And I hope that together we can settle on something that is good enough for other people to argue with, including our future selves. So that's where we're going. That link is up, and we can pick it up right here tomorrow. Thanks, y'all. Anybody got closing thoughts before we jump off?
Yes, I do. I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you, James, for your high-level thinking, for your thoughtfulness in doing all these, not only little details, even these. I mean, it's amazing. And that's the success, that's the path for a long-lasting success with these things. It's not only the teaching, it's not only the day-to-day, but the little things like these are key too. So thank you for that.
You bet, brother. Thank you. I'm also changing the date here. Deadline for feedback. Voila. Oh, it didn't update yet. Still pushing. Hung it up. Anyway, there we go. We'll add 24 hours to the feedback window, and be sure to jump into either Discord or the issue board here to continue to add thoughts as we go. Thanks, everybody, and see you tomorrow. I hope everybody here can make it, because this work is incomplete, and I'm excited to keep going together.
Hey.
All right.
Hey. All right. Awesome.
Hey, Sebastian, what's going on?
Hey, man. I find this. I'm gonna share the screen. Share the screen a little. A moment.
Yeah. Let me stop.
Okay. Sorry. I found this morning this page, the Plutus resources, and they request information about projects like us in Dandelion and the PBL. And I'm putting your email, so please don't remember that they can put in contact with you for maybe request some other information. That's cool.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. That's great.
I have to take this chance in this moment, because you are not easy to find, man.
The ever elusive James.
If you make yourself easy to find, you never get anything done.
And that's a problem.
Wait, just quickly before everyone jumps off, yesterday someone asked an interesting question. I think it was Lockhart asked, and maybe James, you might be able to actually put it in a much more eloquent way, but Lockhart asked about the translation of what Gent is doing. And given that I've just seen that he's around, I don't know whether that makes sense to either pick up on now or tomorrow. What do you think, James?
Yeah, translation is, top topic right now, because it's already started, and I know that we have some some Catalyst funded work to do on that regard. So for me, there's like a 1A and a 1B. 1A is prioritizing course revisions, because we recognize that, okay, we built this thing as we did it since July. Testnet broke and we had to revise some things. So it's urgent to go through and just make sure the course is as up to date as it can be, check for clarity, that kind of thing. Because to me, that's the prerequisite to then saying, okay, now that we've checked off the revision, this thing is ready to go and be translated. Now, Jonty's an original developer of this course, so has a clearer view on it than most. So if you're already translating, that's amazing. I know that you can make those edits on the fly, but I think that's a lot to ask of people, right? So while some people will be able to make edits as they translate, we want to provide the easiest possible resource for those translators who come along.
Awesome. Yeah, just a quick one, Janti. I think one of the main things that that popped up yesterday was the idea of cross-cultural translation, because like some stuff or some ideas might make sense, say in the context of the West, but in different cultures, that might not so directly the interpretation. There's translation and then there's interpretation, right? In that kind of thing. So yeah, I think what Lockhart was asking is wondering whether there are any instances where you found, from a culture standpoint, where you're having to like reframe stuff or yeah, to be more culturally relevant, I suppose.
Thanks. Yes, again, as James said, I think it will be available. And once we think about translation, we'll take an approach which is more like not so much formal, but at least standardized. We can start with French for sure. We also have Swahili coming up through the different groups, but French is the first because we have also many people can actually do it. And the translation is actually from English to French because the content of English is quite larger. So it's not actually more the French verse towards English, it's more like still the English part towards the French. And we have members who are, many here actually do speak French and they can write in French. So we can do the subgroup. We have like 20 students. So we may start to make it a bit more formal. So yes, I'm trying to be more available and make more translations for it. Yeah.
Awesome, cool, thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for getting that going. It's good to see you, man. How's the team doing? Good. All right. Somebody just triggered me on something else, but it came and went. I'm sure it'll come back. So we'll get there. All right. Thanks, team. If anybody hasn't heard, Daedalus Turbo is presenting at After Town Hall today. So if anybody has questions for them about their Catalyst proposal, should be fun. Should be like some, reality TV vibes in there. If you're looking for something to do. Otherwise, see you tomorrow. Later, y'all.